to what we produce as an end product, inception, conception, forwards, with regard to the product. It applies to everything we do. It's about efficiency, it's about making sure it's easier for us to work with systems. It's about improvement, constant improvement.
Hello and welcome to the MTDCNC Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Reynolds, and I'm a proud member of the MTDCNC team. Joining me today is Nick Welsman, Engineering Manager here at Walter Tools. Welcome to the podcast, Nick.
Thank you, Joe.
Before we start about today's topic, if we can have a couple of minutes about you, really, Nick. What's your background and what do you do here at Walter?
Okay, my background, I started as an apprentice at, it was then known as British Leyland, became Leyland Cars and then Jaguar Rover Triumph. I trained after my apprenticeship as a production engineer and was heavily involved in the planning and design of manufacturing systems, which have obviously included a lot of tooling. And I got to know tool suppliers very well. I was made an attractive offer by a specialist tool supplier, and I joined his team that incorporated tungsten carbide from major manufacturers. And I went to then a major manufacturer, and approximately 27 years ago ended up at Walter.
27 years, wow! That's, if we move swiftly on, then that's 27 years. You've seen a lot happen. I'd like to focus on that, the history of Walter, and you're the best person to ask by the sounds of it. It's an interesting business here at Walter. You're built on innovation, but also acquisition of leading companies. So, yeah, if you can tell us a little bit about the history and the acquisitions and where you are today, please.
Okay, well, the history of Walter really stems back to the early 1900s when hard materials was developed, circa 1919, and then Richard Walter got his hands on it approximately mid-1920s. And he was the guy who managed to put a cutting edge on this very hard material. From there it grew. When materials in the 1940s, the traditional cutting materials, steel alloys, became scarce, then the concentration was on using tungsten carbide tools as the cutting material. He also, in parallel with the development of the tools, created ways to sharpen and grind the tools, which grew up as Walter Grinders in parallel to the Walter Tooling Company, or Walter Argay as it was known. The developments went through, obviously, the 60s and the 70s when coatings started coming in. Yeah. And also, Walter was known very heavily as a very competent milling specialist. Yeah. But the need to expand the range into other tooling disciplines was obvious to make your mark on the marketplace. And as such, turning, drilling ranges were developed also. Still indexable, one of the first companies to put a hole through a piece of solid carbide to attach it with a screw to the cutting bodies. And developments accelerated in the late 70s, early 80s with the coating technology. I arrived around the end of the beginning of the 90s. And what happened then during my tenure was concentration not only on the substrates, but also the coating development. And in the 2000s, Walter invested heavily, and I mean heavily, in coating development as a key to protecting the substrates. Not blowing our own trumpets, but since then we've pretty much been the leader in coating development, taking an independent path. And today we've ended up with Tiger-tec Gold.
Yeah, just touch on that, Tiger-tec Gold. I know it's not today's topic as such, but what is it for the engineers listening?
What is it? It's a tooling system with an extremely innovative coating that actually gives greater protection to the substrates and allows for higher speeds, therefore higher productivity and longer tool lives. We're talking cost efficiency here.
And when you say tooling systems, what particular disciplines?
We're talking about milling, turning and drilling.
Okay, and now if we move on to what your mantra, I suppose, here at Walter Tools, engineering competence.
Yes.
I know what it means literally, but what does it mean to Walter?
Okay, you're right in saying it's a mantra. It doesn't only apply to what we produce as an end product, but it's for an conception forwards with regard to the product. It applies to everything we do. It's about efficiency. It's about making things easier for us to work with systems. It's about improvement, constant improvement.
Okay, and if we talk about engineering competence, it's what falls under that banner? I know you've got some software solutions. Clearly, you've got a massive portfolio of cutting tools. So how does it all tether together between the software, the human beings, the engineers, the end user, and of course the products?
Okay, well, if we approach it from the end user's point of view, which is the most important thing to us, then they have to be able to access the right tools for the right applications and have the right data on hand. We live in a world where people expect instant results. They expect access to those results, yeah? And we have to be ready with the correct information and the correct product when they tap into that demand.
Yeah, absolutely. But in terms of products, I presume it's going to fall, and all products are going to fall into this engineering competence banner.
Yes, that's correct.
So if I bring an aerospace component, an engine component, medical component to you guys, you can go away and you can almost engineer a solution to come back with the tools, possibly even programs and cycle times.
Yes, that's right. To be more specific, we have a tech centre in Tubing as our HQ. And if a customer wants us to go forward with a project and supply us with samples and all the data with those samples and an expectation of result, we will aim towards that by actually applying the techniques and then bringing the customer over to see the tools, the techniques, the programs, as you say.
And an interesting one, this I like to ask all. I'm a tooling engineer myself, so I always like to ask this question when we talk about cutting tools on the podcast. You've been in the industry a long time, clearly. What's been the biggest innovation since you've been in this industry? You mentioned, some of the technology going back to the early 1900s, but since you've been in the industry, what's been the biggest step change, biggest elevation, I guess?
I think, and they leap ahead of each other, obviously, machine tools. And the demands from the customers upon the machine tool makers, and we've got to provide the consumable product to go with those machine tools. So we take it in leaps and bounds ahead of each other with regard to productivity and cost-effective productivity. We're talking about lowering the customer's unit price.
Sure, absolutely. But if we look at products, presumably you've been here a long time. You were converting people from HSS to carbide drills and giving them data that they could only dream of, presumably.
Correct. That's been one of the main aims, is to make the carbide tooling more accessible, more user-friendly for the customers. And that's an important point you made there, yeah, that they've got to be able to use it with confidence. The data has got to be spot on, yeah. And they've also got to achieve the promises we make them.
Yeah, quite. You've been here a long time, haven't you? 27 years. So presumably, I'm in the building, beautiful building. This must be a nice place to work if you've been here this long.
It is. There's a great team spirit in here. It is a nice place to work. It's in the centre of the country, obviously, so everything's accessible.
Yeah, great products and great people here at Walter Tools. But Nick, thank you so much for joining us on today's MTDCNC podcast. It's been great to learn about Walter Tools and how it all started and where we are here today. But yeah, thank you so much for your time, Nick, and thank you all at home for listening.
Thanks for listening to the MTD podcast. If you found value in this episode, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. Find more episodes on mtdcnc.com.